And when I think about Huckleberry and how it was originally started and formed, I was in the thick of that, and my age group was very rebellious.
That was Denise Coleman, consultant and advisor for Huckleberry Youth. I'm Jeff, and this is Storied San Francisco, a podcast all about the artists, activists, and small businesses that make this city what it is. Welcome to part 1 of our episode on Huckleberry Youth. In this podcast, we'll meet Denise and Huckleberry's executive director/CEO, Doug Stiles. Denise and Doug, both born and raised San Franciscans, will share their stories of growing up and eventually finding their way to this nonprofit, which celebrated 50 years back in 2017, and which serves to provide care and housing for at-risk youth. Here's my conversation with Denise Coleman and Doug Stiles.
I was born and raised in San Francisco, actually born at the what is now known as the Kaiser French campus. It was known as French Hospital.
Okay. Which one is that?
The one out on Geary and Geary at 8th, I think it is. And 8th.
Yeah. By the SFPD station, right?
Yes. In fact, right across the street from SFPD.
I was just telling my wife the other day, because we had occasion to be over there, and I was like, I remember that parking lot. I got a COVID test way back in the day.
Right.
When you had to go to get it.
And to give you some other interesting history, this has nothing to do with anything, but just some other interesting history. My father, when my mother was delivering me, right? Mm-hmm. And they told him that he had to pay cash for the delivery.
Oh.
Right? And he was like, oh my God. So he's calling all these people, but he kept saying all the white people go up there and they were making payments. Right?
Yeah.
So he went up there and graciously said, well, here's my payment. Mm-hmm. And they took it and sent him on his way.
Awesome.
And I was always interested that he had the foresight and the gumption and the everything else to do that in a time and a frame where he probably could have been arrested.
Yeah, for real.
Yes.
Can you give us a decade? You don't have to age yourself, but a decade you came
50s.
Into this world. The 50s, okay.
50s, I don't mind. I'm a very proud 68-year-old.
Hell yeah.
Well kept.
Yeah.
Single. Black woman.
Yes.
That was born and raised in San Francisco, and lived in. My sister and I were talking about this the other day. We lived in what was called Upper Haight, Ashbury.
Okay. Yeah.
Now it's called Cove Valley.
Oh, got it. So it's south of Haight Street.
Yes.
Over there. Yeah.
Yes. Over by Parnassus. By the hospital by UC. Yeah.
Right.
So on a street called Belvedere.
Yeah.
And, I had a great and interesting childhood.
You grew up in the 60s, a little bit in the 70s, maybe?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. All of that.
Can you tell us about your San Francisco back then?
San Francisco was fun. We just had fun. We played all day, every day outside. We came in. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. My father worked 2 jobs.
Yeah.
There were 5 of us, 4 girls and 1 boy.
Oh,
yes.
That lucky boy.
Yes. Oh my God.
From my perspective, anyway. I grew up with brothers, so I'm like,
Oh, but listen, sisters are far worse because we're needy.
Yeah.
And he's very protective of us as a brother.
Okay.
Because he was the only male.
Yeah.
So he was, and my father was always at work.
Right.
So he felt like he needed to be the male, and we had to remind him often that he was not daddy.
4 against 1. Wow.
I know.
Okay.
And we went. Childhood was fun. Our weekends were spent skating or being on a skateboard or a homemade roller coaster and scooter and
what?
Yeah, we
homemade roller coasters
with barbarian wheels.
What the heck?
My father would bring those barbarian wheels. He worked for the train, Southern Pacific.
Oh,
and he'd bring those barbarian wheels home, and oh my God,
Yeah.
nail them on to some 2x4 and
Just out in the street?
out in the street.
Hell yeah. Yep.
And you'd use rope as your steering wheel. Yeah.
Yes, I love it.
And it
I
was
love
just
it.
riding down those hills. It was amazing. We had a great time. And because I was a teenager during the Vietnam War and all that happened on Haight, Ashbury, I was very much into the demonstrations, marching my little Rudy Tooty down Haight Street like everybody else was into the Golden Gate Park.
Yes.
And
those are formative years.
Teenage, amazing years.
Right. And
amazing
so you were shaped by that stuff.
And when I think about Huckleberry and how it was originally started and formed, I was in the thick of that.
Right.
You know, and my age group was very rebellious. When I would get mad at my mother for whatever reason, which was often, I would go down and chant at the Hare Krishna temple.
Okay.
Which was on, what was that? Schrader and Frederick.
Yeah. Okay.
And so I learned the Hare Krishna chant very well.
Center yourself again, or
just to get out of the environment,
yeah,
and just to be somewhere where I was just really at peace.
Yeah, right.
For lack of any other way to put that.
Right.
And so, you know, home life was different. My father was always gone. My mother was always there. So there was that friction of, you know, oh my God, she is doing an actual job now that I realize that. And I completely and thoroughly understand her. Now.
Yes.
A friend of mine just wrote this book called Mom Rage. And I can, when I think about that and I think about her and all that was expected of her.
Right.
During that time, yeah.
You said your dad had 2 jobs. Your mom had 5.
Yes.
Or 6.
Or 6.
Yeah.
Right. If you include the house and the cooking and
7,
the cleaning
including
and
her
the
husband.
washing. And then there's that. Yes. So it was, you know, it was interesting growing up, to say the least. I had a sister who at the time was very much involved in the drugs in San Francisco. And she ultimately succumbed to an overdose.
I'm sorry.
Thank you. And that was really hard at that time.
You were still a teenager?
I was 16.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I was 16.
Okay.
And so that was weird because culturally, we just didn't talk about a lot of things. You know, things happened, they just happened, and you just moved on from them.
Right.
You know, so it was just a different time.
Sure.
You know, graduating. So, I mean, I ended up graduating from St. Mary's Cathedral.
I was just about to ask. Let's hear, how about a full rundown of all the SF schools you went to?
I went grammar school. I was at Grattan, which was right around the corner from where we live.
Right.
It was great to be able to walk to school. And from Grattan, I went to St. Agnes.
Okay.
Which is over on Ashbury. They had a grammar school, elementary school.
And are these Catholic?
Catholic.
Okay.
And then from St. Agnes, I went to Herbert Hoover.
Okay.
And from Hoover, I went to St. Mary's Cathedral, which is where I ended up graduating from.
Okay.
In 73.
Oh, the year I was born.
Oh. Did he just say that?
No, I what I should have said is happy 50th high school
reunion.
We
did just have
that's what I
yes.
meant. Yeah. I'll edit that. No.
That's funny.
Okay, 73.
Yeah.
Okay, and
from there went on to the College of San Mateo, and I was there for 2 years. Graduated.
I was just about to ask if leaving San Francisco or the Bay Area was ever a question.
No.
Yeah, you're just like, this is it.
This is it. Yeah, you know. Plus, I was at that age where I need to get out of the house. You know, there was a lot of stuff going on internally, and it was time for me to go. My mother and I were best friends as long as I was away from home. When I was at home, you know, and so
where do you fall in the 5?
I'm the 4th one.
So next to baby, next to youngest. Okay.
Yes, where you had the baby being babied, and then all the other ones done broke every rule in the house.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
So now here I am.
Yeah.
You know,
a lot of expectations.
A lot.
Yeah. Okay. College of San Mateo. Did you stay living at home, or did you went down there?
We went down there.
Okay.
It was myself and two of my cousins, and we got a 3-bedroom apartment.
Yes.
I know, it was so exciting.
It's a little was it Three's Company? No.
It was fun.
It was just being young and free. Right.
It was amazing. We had the best time. That was probably 2 of the best years of my life.
Awesome.
You know, I met some awesome people that are still great friends, and it was a good time.
Yeah.
It was a good time.
Yeah.
So I left San Mateo. My thought was to go to San Francisco State. I got there and really never connected.
Mm-hmm.
And started just getting on with my life, started working.
Here in the city?
Yes.
What kind of places did you work?
Oh, my God.
Name, I don't know, 3.
Okay, I worked at Granite Brothers, which is a jewelry store.
Okay.
And I was a collector. I collected on the debt that people had.
Got it.
I also worked for Levitz Furniture store, which
you'll
is
love it at Levitz.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And I was a
was that out here on Geary, or
that was the one? It was in South City.
Oh, South City. Okay, got it.
Off of Grand.
Okay, yeah.
And I was a credit authorizer kind of a person.
Kind of a similar.
Yes. Just going from one to the other. And so that was my job for a while. And somehow in the midst of all of that, I got hung up in the whole crack epidemic.
Okay.
I could tell you how that started, but I won't.
70s or 80s?
Well, let me back up a little bit.
Sure.
This was in the mid 70s.
Mm-hmm.
And once I graduated from San Mateo, I got a job with the airlines as a flight attendant.
Oh, okay. Which one?
Western Airlines.
Oh, yeah.
The only way to fly.
I love how many ad slogans are coming up in this episode. Yeah.
And so I did that for 2 years, and that was an incredible experience.
Got to see the world a little bit.
I got to see, especially the western part of the coast, which is why it was called Western. Yeah. So that was fun and great. And again, I can't even remember, but somehow, I don't know if it was in between jobs or while I was still working. Somehow, I started dibbling and dabbling with cocaine here and there. Mm-hmm. And it just went from one extreme to the other. Mm-hmm. And I was a full-fledged crack addict, doing all the things that addicts do. Okay. For years, for a long time. Okay. About 8 years. Wow. And then I went into Delancey Street.
Okay.
And I was in Delancey Street for almost 7 years.
Okay.
And in Delancey Street, I came in through San Francisco and ended up going to their facility in Santa Monica, and then in Greensboro, North Carolina.
Oh.
And then to Brewster, New York.
Wow.
So they have campuses in all those places.
Yeah.
And I had the opportunity to go and be a resident in each one of them.
Okay.
And then when I decided to leave Delancey Street, I got a call from Mimi Silbert, who runs Delancey Street. She's the, I guess, CEO, CFO, blah, 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 blah.
A big deal.
A big deal, right. Mm-hmm. And so she called and asked if we would come out and work at the program that they were starting. It was a juvenile justice program.
Okay.
And so the first opportunity we had, we said no, right? Because we didn't want to leave North Carolina. We were back in North Carolina and loved it there, right? And she asked us again the following year. That was in 98. She asked us again in 99. And we said yes.
Okay.
And we came out to San Francisco. I hadn't been in San Francisco in like 7 years.
7 years, yeah.
And it was a true culture shock.
Yeah, it had changed.
It had changed
a little bit.
And my husband says, I should have let you buy that house in Greensboro.
Wow.
Because housing was so expensive here.
Yeah.
And I didn't even realize how expensive things had gotten, but it was really expensive. So we came back to San Francisco.
for that work that you were going to do.
Yes.
Okay.
For the work that we were going to do. And the program was actually called the Community Assessment and Referral Center, CARC.
Okay. And this is in the juvenile justice program. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And after the first year that I was here, Delancey Street realized that they couldn't run the program anymore. It was just beyond what they had expected, and contacted Huckleberry and asked Huckleberry to take over.
Okay.
The juvenile justice program that is still in existence now.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So
you were there for that, I guess, transition to Huckleberry from Delancey, like a handoff.
Which makes it really kind of nice because, because I know a lot about the history. And so that's cool, really kind of bring it into focus. So, and so I've been there ever since. So we changed hands, and it was quite an experience working with young people, because in Delancey Street, they're all adults. So I went from working with the adults to working with almost like their children, figuratively, because a lot of the kids,
generationally.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So it was very interesting. And while I was at Huckleberry, I went back to school, got my undergraduate's degree.
Oh, at State or somewhere else?
At State. And then not too long after that, I graduated and started working on my master's.
Okay.
And so after the first year of my master's, my husband got sick and ultimately passed away from cancer. Thank you. And I didn't feel like going back to school. Mm-hmm. And I was incredibly depressed and, mourning for a very long time. Sure. And one day I woke up and I said, I'm going back to school. Okay. And so I did. I went back and got my master's at 59.
Okay. Hell yes.
And that was incredibly exciting and incredibly challenging and probably one of the best fucking things I could have done in my life.
Yes. I love it. I love it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Denise, do you have children?
I have no children.
Okay.
I had a father. I adored my father. I saw what he did every day, and I knew what he was doing it for, and he was an incredible, incredible man. He had a great heart, and people everywhere just adored him. Yeah. And so I always wanted to have my child's father like the father that I had.
Right.
And unfortunately, I never ran into a man like that.
You didn't meet that guy. Yeah. Wow.
I always met the bottom of the totem pole. Oh. So as a result of that, I never had kids. But everyone in my little community thought I would be the first one to have a child. Right. And everyone else had kids.
And I'm sure you're an auntie many times over.
Oh, my God. You have no idea. Right. You have no idea. Yes, yeah. I watched them come from the womb, right? And just be right there with them along the way. Yeah. And then working in juvenile justice, you fall in love with a lot of the kids.
Sure.
A lot of colleagues. It's just been an incredible experience working at Huckleberry. I've learned so much about politics and how all of that works. The juvenile justice system, our young people, and the fact that they do not need to be in jail, right, and traumatized for the rest of their lives, and working towards that goal.
Right on.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think now might be a good time.
So I'm Doug Stiles, and I was also born and raised in San Francisco.
Okay.
In this neighborhood in the Richmond District.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I first lived on 12th Avenue off Clement. And
Still inner.
The inner Richmond,
Still
yes.
Inner, yeah.
Inner Richmond. And then my family moved to 5th Avenue, and so lived in 2 houses growing up here.
Okay.
And not in I guess some years in the 60s. I was born in 65, so I don't remember much of the 60s because I was a little bit young.
That's why I always like to get the decade, and I'm like, about 10 years later, we could talk about that.
Yeah, but the decades are very interesting. You were talking about Season of the Witch, and you could see like the movement and the changes of things, and when you leave the city and come back, very different. It is evolving, I guess, like every place, but it really has evolved.
So you grew up in the 70s.
So I grew up in the 70s.
San Francisco.
Yes.
Yeah.
70s.
How was that for you?
The 70s were interesting because as a kid, we had a lot of fun. I think a lot of the stories that Denise tells, we did go-karts riding down the hill. I remember riding my bike. So here in the inner Richmond, going to the Golden Gate Park, riding all the way out to the beach, hanging out at the beach for a bit, and then riding all the way back by myself.
Right.
Sometimes friends would join, but sometimes not. I'd just get up and go. And
there is something that I wanted to say when Denise was telling your stories about growing up in San Francisco. I was like, not locking doors.
Yes.
Kids going out and just being kids without parents.
Yes.
And maybe getting hurt, maybe getting sick, but also surviving and probably being a little tougher and thicker skinned for it. Is my because I'm a kid of the late 70s and 80s, and that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
But in today's San Francisco, it does not make sense. It does not compute to people.
Yeah, it's very different. It's very different. And I remember going to some late movie down in, did I tell you this before? No. Down in the Mission District. And I came out and the buses weren't running. So I walked home from the Mission District through the Fillmore District. I'm a white guy by myself. And I mean, everybody knew that was a dangerous place to be. And just did it. I don't know if my mom knew that, I do know. But you would be out doing those kinds of things.
It was
and
practical.
I think,
point A to point B.
Yes.
Boom.
Yeah.
I love that story of walking home from the Mission to the inner Richmond and through the Fillmore. And again, I think people, transplants or younger people will be like, what?
Yeah.
Like, and then there's also the thing of, for outsiders, people think like San Francisco is a super hilly city. They don't really understand that 7x7 is not very big, but it's a walkable city.
Yes.
It's an incredibly walkable city.
And you can find ways around the hills,
That's
you
the
know,
key.
and that's, you just got to know where you need to go and stuff. But
did you follow the bus route? Maybe the 22 route or something?
Probably, yeah.
That's probably what you did. Yeah.
I would guess so. But it was the 70s were a dangerous time.
Sure.
I mean, I played basketball in middle school, and I was one of the only white people in the, not just in my school playing basketball, but in the league or whatever it was. And our coach would walk us out to the bus stop and sit with us at the bus stop because there was always concern about getting jumped or things like that. It was tough in middle school. I know people would come. Anyway, it was a tough time across the board. And
can we hear which schools you went to, please?
Sure, if I can remember. Yeah. So I started off at Sutro. Well, each school is an interesting story too.
Yeah, sure.
So I started off at Sutro, which is in Richmond. And then I was supposed to go to Alamo, which is out in the avenues, but they were building that. So I went to what they called Alamo Golden Gate, which is where the Golden Gate School is on Golden Gate and Steiner. I can't remember.
Yeah. Sounds right.
But at that time, Patty Hearst and the SLA were a block away in an apartment. I didn't know. I was a young kid at that time.
Season of the Witch.
Yeah, Season of the Witch ties in. And then from there, I went to, I'm probably missing something. I went to Lafayette. I am missing. I went to Cabrillo first. So 4th and 5th grade, I was at Cabrillo, which now is office buildings. And that's out at 25th and Balboa. Then I went to Lafayette for 6th grade. Then I went to Everett down in the Mission.
Church and
16th. Yeah, Church and 16th. And then I went to Lowell High School. And so all over the city in terms of where I was in terms of schools. But I remember being at Everett when Moscone was shot, and we were in gym. We were all sitting around, and the teacher came in late and said, "I'm sorry, but we're gonna not have class today." And in fact, they let us all go home. I remember. And he just said the mayor's been shot, and there was, I was like, "What the hell is going on with this place?"
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So that kind of tension I remember the feeling, and I was also just out in the community doing stuff.
Being
So it was like,
kid.
being a kid at the same time. Yeah.
Do you remember attention before the murders, or was that sort of like a pinnacle, like or
No, I
in your mind,
think
like,
there was stuff before that.
you felt it as a kid?
I was never involved in the protests. I think we're kind of after Vietnam.
Sure.
My parents weren't either, but there was always kind of a tension thing. There was racial tension. The city really is neighborhood focused in terms of race, and that showed up in different ways in schools. So
There's also the LGBTQ tension.
Yes,
because
yes.
that was not being warmly embraced
Exactly.
Right.
by people either.
by certain elements.
Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah, it wasn't, we think of this as being this accepting city. No, it wasn't always.
Right.
Yeah.
It's sometimes, I don't want to say forced, but it's like people are just gonna fucking do what they want to do.
Yes. Yeah.
Did you, as a kid, I'm guessing you probably knew who Moscone was. He's the mayor, but did you know who Harvey Milk was already in your life?
I don't recall at that time. I did know Moscone. I don't recall knowing Dan White was a supervisor before, and Harvey Milk. I don't remember. I'm not.
All good.
I don't recall. Yeah.
Yeah, but on that day, now you know.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
My dad worked down at the state building.
Oh.
And he was working that night when they had the
White night.
and
Okay.
his car got burnt in the
Oh.
melee.
Dang.
So I know, right? So
Collateral damage.
Right.
Yeah.
Of course, right. And my father was homophobic. He was very, 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 very mad. And so, but I remember that night very clearly too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember feeling my parents being worried and not saying a lot about it, but just feeling that kind of caution and like this is tense and
I'm young enough that, I missed, and I didn't grow up in San Francisco, but I would think like my equivalents are 9/11, maybe January 6th of like, this crap is unfolding and you're like, what's next?
Yes.
You don't know when or maybe even earthquakes where you're like, well, that was fun. When is it? What's next? Just doing the math, you must have graduated high school in the early 80s.
Yes, 83.
83, which is also the year Return of the Jedi came out.
Yes.
Anyway.
Well, it's so, I remember the Cornet Theater was right around the corner where we are. We used to go when the first Star Wars came out, 77, I think. We would go in to the early show and then we'd go into the bathroom in between shows and then sneak back in for a second one. So we could like see
double
it
feature
over and over again.
Yeah.
I saw that movie so many times. Oh, yeah.
Hey, that worked when I was still a kid in the 80s, the 90s.
Yeah.
So, but you were at the Cornet. Let's just dork out.
The Cornet Theater.
I brought it up.
Yes.
the Star Wars stuff.
Yes.
Okay. So what was after high school for you?
So after high school, I went to UC Santa Cruz, just down the road. And I majored in theater with an emphasis in directing.
Okay.
And was had a wonderful time. Had a great time there.
Yes.
And in Santa Cruz, it was an interesting time. When I went there, it was a very small school. They had, 6,000 students or something like that.
Okay.
And by the time I left, they were up to 10, 11,000.
Oh,
and
wow.
now it's grown since then. So it really was a small school when I went, which was really nice. A walkable campus. I loved walking around there. It was beautiful up in the redwoods, and had some really interesting instructors and met some fabulous people. It was a great time. So I went and worked in the theater for a year plus.
Was that in Santa Cruz or where was that?
So I went back to the Berkshires in Massachusetts.
Oh.
And was a production manager for a theater there and trained actors, was doing acting classes and workshops, and really enjoy doing the workshops more than doing the production side of things. Because
so like teaching more than, because I know production is its own.
Well, production's
beast.
fun.
Yeah.
But what I I liked the art rather than the product. So the creativity, I should say, rather than the product.
Yeah. Okay.
And because the product, in the end, eventually you need to make money and there's compromise. And I really liked working with the people and seeing the ideas burst and seeing what came out of individuals or groups when they worked together. Mm-hmm. So then I came back to San Francisco and...
what brought you back? You said you did enjoy.
I did. I enjoyed being back. I didn't know what to do. So, I was in my 20s. And I kind of worked through the theater that I was in and wanted to do something else. Wasn't sure. I started to apply to graduate programs in theater directing. Okay. And came back to San Francisco, moved in with my parents, and worked through that application process. Didn't get in anywhere. And then...
That's a sign.
Yes, well, it was a sign.
It's a bummer, but you're like, okay, let's just accept
next?
This
yeah,
and
so
move on.
What I did then was there's a local school, the California Institute of Integral Studies, that had a program in drama therapy.
Over in Berkeley?
They're in San Francisco.
They're in SF. Okay, okay.
And I thought drama therapy, that's kind of what I'm talking about, is how do you work with people using creativity? And I thought, I'm going to learn about this and then go back and train actors or whatever. But that's kind of what shifted me into working with people in a therapeutic way, using creativity, using psychology. And so I got my master's there. After that, I went to Connecticut and worked back to the East Coast.
Northeast.
I went, boop, 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 boop. And worked at the National Center for Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder at the VA in New Haven, Connecticut.
Wow.
Worked with a lot of Vietnam vets and some Korean vets. And at that time, Gulf War vets were coming back. And
so this is 90s.
Yes, so this is 90s.
Okay.
Exactly, early 90s. And that was fascinating and challenging and sad and all of those things. Mm-hmm. But being using the creative arts, using theater, and trying to help people cope with all of the things that were going on, was really fascinating. So from there, I decided I need to learn more about this stuff. So I applied to a doctoral program here in the Bay Area in psychology, got my clinical PhD in psychology, worked with adults primarily until I graduated, and then found that most of the jobs were working with families and youth. And I thought, well, I need money, so I better take these jobs. Found that I really loved working with adolescents and families. In terms of those sparks in creativity that we're talking about, but also the struggle and the challenge of who am I becoming is kind of the adolescent phase.
Right.
Very interesting, really difficult, but very interesting to work with. Yeah. Spent a couple years in Sacramento area working with a family agency doing clinical work. Okay. Then moved back to San Francisco. Took a job.
Someone out there's keeping count.
I know, you kind of back and forth.
Can't keep you away.
I think that's what it speaks to you more. What is it? I left my heart. Left my heart. And then you caught up with your heart.
Yeah. And so I moved to San Francisco, but worked on the Peninsula for 10 years at an agency and moved into administrative management positions. Okay. Created training programs for clinical psychology for master's and doctoral level people.
Oh, wow. So now you're teaching the teachers.
Yeah. And then had 2 kids along the way, but have been...
That doesn't change anything.
No, nothing. No, that's just adding tasks to your day. No. The amazing thing, I'll just say this, the amazing thing about having kids, for me anyway, was that I became a whole different person. Right. It wasn't... I joke about, it's not just adding tasks. You don't just now drive somebody someplace, or you don't just now show up at the parent-teacher conference. You become a whole different person. Yeah. And so that was happening simultaneously. Then I was there for 10 years at this agency. Yeah.
On the Peninsula.
On the Peninsula.
Okay.
And I was ready to do something new and different. And I happened to be tracking this agency in San Francisco called Huckleberry Youth Programs.
Tracking?
Yes. And I saw that the executive director was announced retirement.
Okay.
And so I thought maybe this is a time for me to move.
That was Doug Stiles, and before him, Denise Coleman, both of Huckleberry Youth. Check back next week for the conclusion of our episode on Huckleberry Youth. Part 2 drops next Tuesday wherever you get podcasts. Music for Storied San Francisco was produced, performed, and curated by Otis McDonald. Aaron Lim of Bitch Talk Podcast is our contributing producer. And the show is produced and hosted by me, Jeff Hunt. Now in our 6th season, we have more than 200 episodes available on our website, storiedsf.com, or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you're able to, please rate and review the show, and drop us a line at storiedsf@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. Keep rejecting those silly doom loop narratives about our city. Stay wacky, weird, healthy, and creative. And we'll see you next time on Storied San Francisco. We acknowledge and respect the first humans of the unceded land we call San Francisco, the Ramaytush Ohlone. We condemn the genocide of these and other tribes across the Western Hemisphere. We honor their legacy and history, and we support rematriation and sovereignty efforts.
This podcast is a proud member of the BFF.FM podcast network. Learn more at podcasts.bff.fm.
BFF.FM, best frequencies forever.